Stay tuned, we're building this today. Hi, welcome to RCKicks. On today's show we're building this monster, the Agrios TXT-2 from Tamiya. Now this kit is 58549 and was released on the 22nd of May 2013. I'm not sure how much I paid for it because I've had it for quite a while now. It was one of the projects that Rebecca was going to build, but she's like fallen in love with the sand scorcher, so while she's building that over the Christmas period, I thought, hey, I might as well build this to bring it to you. Otherwise, it'll just drift on as more and more projects come in. Now, I had a quick look to see what the current prices of these are. And like everything else, they've gone up quite a bit. But I have seen them for around £330 to £340 upwards. So shop around if you're interested in one of these, because they can get a bit expensive. Right, let's unbox this monster and we'll kick off building it. But you're not going to see that. I'll just skip straight ahead to everything laid out so we can do page 1. Right, we're all laid out, ready to go. Now, we're going to kick off on page 4. One thing that I've noticed about this kit that I didn't realise is it doesn't have an electronic speed controller. And this car uses 2 motors. I thought that it had one in the box like my clog, but it didn't. I'll have to place an order for one. Hopefully it will come soon, but we'll just carry on with the build anyway. The only other thing I found was there's a lot of brass bushings in this kit, which is kind of crazy really, because Tamiya puts tons of metal in this kit. There is loads of pieces of metal. All these gears, I mean, they're beautiful. And then they throw in a load, I mean literally a load. There must be 15 to 20 brass bushes. Luckily I've got replacements for them, but it's not a cheap kit. It's quite an expensive one. I can understand, you know, there's a lot of metal, and like these sections are metal as well. A big part of these are metal as well. You've got metal side plates, so they go to all that and then they just forget £4 worth of bushes. Anyway, there we go. That's Tamiya. We've kind of been over this a million times already, but hey, we'll move on from it. Tyres are weird. They're kind of strange tyres. Not what you kind of expect to see compared to things like the Clod Buster. And I will be putting this up against the Clod Buster to see what it's like. We want to do 4-wheel steering as well. That'd be cool. Right, we're kicking off with the gearboxes straight away. So let's crack on and see how far we can get today. In this kit you'll find 2 bags of white gears. You'll only need 1 for this build. There's a lot of bearings in this kit, and before you know it you'll be needing them. Tamiya supplied 2 tubes of ceramic grease in this kit, so you've got plenty to go around. Before you close up the center gearbox, make sure everything moves freely. This build requires quite a lot of thread lock. You only get 1 gram in the kit, so use it sparingly, otherwise you'll run out. Obviously if you've got extra, use that as well. Now I'm about to make a mistake here by putting my BA2 3x20mm in the wrong hole. As you can see, I'm trying to screw it in. That's not the position it should be. It should be inside the recessed area. If you notice, I will now move it to the correct location. Don't make the same mistake as I did. Now I went with the kit silver cans, as when I built my Super Clod Buster I put silver cans in it and that was ample. So before I decide whether I'm going to change these for some torque tune motors, I'll try it out on the silver canned kit motors first. Don't do the motors up too tight because you will be adjusting them in a short while. This was a new one for me as I've never built a dual motor single gearbox before. Don't worry, you can fit the 19 teeth pinions before you fit the 40 teeth gear. You can just spread the motors apart and the gearing will slide into the middle. Now we're on page 5, number 4. We'll fit the motors to the gearbox housing. Don't forget there's a BA6 3x10mm screw underneath the motors. About to see me make my second mistake. I'm trying to use the plate BA23 using a BA3 3x10mm screw to screw into the housing. I'm actually screwing it in too low. If you see, I change and screw it in the correct location. Right, well that's the centre gearbox done. It's pretty beefy, but yeah, no problems at all with that. We move on to page 6 now, which is we're starting to put the chassis together. So that's pretty cool. Hopefully it's going to start looking like a big truck pretty quickly. It takes up a lot of room, but I can understand why. Look at the size of some of these axles. They're massive, exactly the same axles that you get on the Juggernaut 2. Right, let's carry on. I like the bumper design. They're using different types of material. The plastic used is very flexible, but sitting just behind that is a metal bar to give it the rigidity it needs. Make sure you're using the correct arms together. The front and rear are actually different. Also, you need to get the orientation correct. Now I found this section a bit tedious. There's a lot of bolts to screw into. Also, they're not all exactly the same, so you've got to keep referencing the manual to make sure you're using the right length bolts. The manual also requires that you use Loctite on nearly every single bolt. Right, we're now on page 7, moving on to step 7. By now the kit Loctite that I was using had started to go off, so if this is all you have, make sure you keep putting the cap back on.
Once the chassis is built, access to these bolts is actually quite tricky, so you want to make sure you use your Loctite. It was great to see the BB11 and BB12 are all made of metal. The centre gearbox needs a small BB10 shims. Make sure you fit them. If you leave them out, it will actually crimp the centre chassis. Now, after what feels like quite a while, we're getting close to closing the chassis up. Make sure before you do that you check all the bolts are in correctly, because once you close up the chassis it makes life a little bit more difficult trying to get to anything that you've made mistakes on. The chassis is now starting to get rather large. Also, it's quite heavy, you'd be surprised. Well, after what feels like 500 screws, we're almost there.
So there's the chassis built. Look at the size of it. It's not what I class as light. It's very robust with the panels in metal holding it all together, with the metal rods that go across in both directions. They're all metal. So yeah, I think they made this one to be pretty tough. Only mistake I made was I put the motors up the gearbox upside down and then I had to take it off, but it was only 2 screws before I sandwiched it all together. One thing I would recommend you check out is that there is a couple of bolts that aren't that clear in the instructions because they're kind of behind something. So make sure that you actually check every bolt so that when you sandwich it together, you can currently still get access to it, but you shouldn't really have any bolts around here left over. I found that it was this one was the one that was in the instructions. I saw a nut on it, but so I knew it needed to have something in there. Then I had to go and try and find where it tells you to put it. I found it in the end, but it's a little bit tricky. So just make sure there should be no holes left in the center section at all, apart from these 2 at the bottom. Right, we now move on to the Monster diffs. So I'll be looking forward to this bit because they are pretty beefy. Right, let's keep going.
The quality of the front and rear diffs are fantastic. All this is metal. Now I've already made a mistake. Can you spot it? This is where my mistake came back to bite me. I couldn't fit the gears into the axle. I thought the problem was the BA15 bearing, but actually I'd put the BC18 drive gear round the wrong way. Don't forget to lube them up before you seal them up. Just practicing my RC force.
Okay, so we're about to start on the diffs. I've just done the back of the bell housing. I had a few issues with that, mainly because I'm trying not to use these brass bushings. I'm trying to use my own bearings. So I thought I had the right one, and then it was a little bit too big, and then I found another one that worked, so there was that problem. Also, I put on BC18 the wrong way round, and I couldn't figure out why it wouldn't fit. So there was a bit of that going on, but I got there in the end. More my own stupidity than anything, but everything's running nice and smoothly now. So that's one side. Now we have to make up the diffs, and then the diffs go this side. Look at the size of that diff. Yeah, and it's all metal, so that's really good. So you can get all these beautiful bits of metal, but then they go and leave out a few pence worth of bearings. Right, let's keep going. Make up the diffs.
So we're now on page 9, number 11, building the diffs. Now there's nothing super special about these diffs at all, just make sure you put the BC5 9mm shims in place. It's a shame Tamiya didn't make these oil diffs. Being that they're so large, it wouldn't be that difficult to make some gaskets and some rubber seals. This is where you say goodbye to your bearing stash. This kit will burn through a hell of a lot of bearings. Yeah, you can see my next problem. I'm using some brass bushes. I'll explain in a minute. When you're sealing up the axle, be careful, the bolts you use are different. There's 3x25 and 3x20. Make sure you use the right ones in the right locations. Also use Loctite. The bolts you use are the black BA7 3mm, not the locking nuts. Now we move on to page 10, number 15. Now we've closed up the axles, we're now going to fit the E4 parts. These are all the same, but you set them up in 2 left and 2 right. That's for the front and the rear. It's good to see these made of hardened plastic. Now this bit can be a little bit tricky, so it helps if you're ambidextrous. Luckily, I am. I'm full of surprises.
Right, the axle's pretty much finished, and I've started on the front bulkhead bumper section. So that's what's going to be at the front and that's going to be at the rear. They're all working fine. Unfortunately, I ran out of BC9s, which are 1260 bearings. Unfortunately, I had to use four or two brass bushes. So I've put them in the same axle, so that way when I dismantle to replace them, I only have to do one axle. Otherwise, if I put them in both, I'll have to dismantle both, and I probably wouldn't bother. It's quite a lot of work anyway, but I just carried on. I did notice a difference. There is a resistance difference, even though there's only 2 bushes and 2 bearings. So I will swap them out. So make sure you pick up BC9s, which are 1260 bearings, and you need BA15, which are 1150. I'll put them in the description, and I'll put a bit below me showing you what they are. You need a lot. There is 4 in each axle. So that's 8 you need of those, as well as all the bearings that go into the center diff as well. So you do burn through a hell of a lot of these brass bushes. You don't want to use brass bushes in this. The resistance will be massively too high. Anyway, right, we move on to the hubs next. Now these hubs and axles are straight off of Juggernaut. I'm not sure if they're also the hubs from a Clod. I am not sure. I'll have to check. Right, let's carry on. We've almost got ourselves a monster truck, and look at the size of that. And most of that is metal. It is massive. These whole plates are metal on the side. A lot of these bars are metal. Bars across the from left to right are all metal as well. So yeah, it's got some heft to it, this one. Okay, let's keep going.
Check out one of these videos for some more RC fun.